Hey folks, welcome back to the Carl Zahn Show, episode XXII. We're using Roman numerals now because I don't even know what episode it is anymore. As you can imagine, it is crazy times. It's a tough time to be doing a weekly show. I can tell you that because as everybody knows, things are just unfolding at warp speed. So obviously last episode I had my little angry rant about the Trump assassination attempt. Of course, in the week preceding that, so much more has come out about the ineptitude of the Secret Service agents that were there. It has turned out, not surprisingly, that the Secret Service was routinely denying Trump his request for more coverage. I don't think you need to be No, it's not a matter of not thinking. You don't need to be a security expert to look at the layout at Butler, Pennsylvania, where he did his rally, and understand that that was completely inept. They should have just had Cub Scouts providing security there. Might actually have been a better outcome. It was so obviously understaffed, and some of the Secret Service people so obviously rookies. This isn't a male-female thing, but the 5'5" woman Secret Service agents who are on that detail that are supposed to shield the protectee, in this case the president, former President Trump. You don't have someone 5'4", 5'5", who is supposed to shield somebody who's 6'3". So we could do a whole half hour just on Butler, Pennsylvania, and the ineptitude of the Secret Service agents. And as I said on last week's show, I called it deliberately sloppy. I'm not a big conspiracy theory guy. I never have been. I don't like these deep dives where you have to put all these, matching puzzle pieces together. And my position has always been that I don't think most of these people are smart enough to construct a really complicated conspiracy that's supposed to bring a desired outcome. I just don't think they have the intellect to do it. What I do think in hindsight is, I think that they let Biden debate Trump. As if you've watched the show regularly, you knew that I made the foolhardy wager early on that I would eat an ant live on this show if the debate ever happened between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, because I was so confident that it would not happen, for the obvious reasons of what happened when they allowed it to happen, if that makes any sense. And looking back on that, you could easily, again, I don't want to go conspiracy theory, but you could easily surmise that let's have Biden do the debate with Trump. In fact, we're going to send Joe Biden out like Clint Eastwood and say, make my day. I'll debate Donald Trump anytime, any place, meet me behind the high school gym. So they may have let Biden do that debate knowing what the outcome would be, because anyone who's watched Biden in the last 3 or 4 years knew what the outcome was going to be to that debate. And then that became their excuse for getting rid of Biden, or increasing pressure to get rid of Biden. And then the deliberately sloppy security for Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, again, not a conspiracy theory. I don't think they engaged this 20-year-old, although there are things coming out that are odd. He had 2 cell phones. He had overseas connections. But again, I think what they did is they created an obvious opportunity for anybody who may have wanted to take a shot at Donald Trump. And we all know there's plenty of people like that. So they created the opportunity. And when you think about it, it's at least partially brilliant, because you can't really finger anybody or blame anybody. You can't really blame anybody for letting Joe Biden debate Trump, although there may have been a predicted outcome there that they wanted. Hard to blame anybody in particular for the sloppy Secret Service coverage, although I think Mayorkas has a hand in it, and certainly Cheadle, who is getting grilled on Capitol Hill as we speak. And from what I just saw moments before sitting down to do the podcast here, she is getting relentlessly grilled, as she should, because she's clearly a dope. I mean, one of the things that she said is that they didn't want to put agents on the roof because of the slope. Well, those roofs are barely sloped at all. And the roof that the Secret Service snipers were planted on has the identical slope to the roof that the shooter was on. In fact, it might even be a little steeper. But a sloped roof is not, that's not a blockade for Secret Service agents. I mean, these guys, rappel down off of helicopters and do all kinds of stuff. So they should be able to be on a practically vertical slate roof if they have to be, if that's what is called upon to protect the president. No drone coverage there, no perimeter coverage. This young man was walking around for an hour now, they say, before the event. They had found a rangefinder on it. I mean, honestly, could there be any more information to make someone say, I think this was maybe not a deliberate effort to have Trump assassinated, but certainly a deliberate effort to open that opportunity wide open. And as I said last week, I've been watching his rallies and events recently, like South Bronx rally, outdoor rally, Trump's famously impromptu stops at like the Philly cheesesteak place and the bodega and the church in Detroit. All these things that Donald Trump is kind of doing routinely now, which seem to me to be really hard situations to secure. Excuse me. As I mentioned last week, I worked many Trump rallies when he ran the first time. I kind of watched the Secret Service in motion. It's pretty fascinating. If you don't see that stuff often, it's very fascinating how they work and how thorough they are. So we have all that to unfold. And now, of course, the more breaking news yesterday of Joe Biden stepping down from the race in 2024. Very odd to release that on a Sunday afternoon. Odd timing, because usually news they don't want you to hear comes out late Friday. News they do want you to hear comes out Monday. So very odd to just see a note from Joe Biden. You have to imagine it was almost like a hostage note. I'm surprised they didn't construct it with little letters cut out of magazines and glued, because it looked like a hostage situation, and then his name signed at the bottom of it. But no word from him, no sign of him, no nothing. So it's absolutely amazing what's going on behind the scenes. And as I said, I could be doing 2 hours every day without batting an eye. There's just so much going on. Have to talk briefly about the predictable liberal response to Trump's assassination attempt. Dr. Fauci, of all people, called it a superficial wound. Well, I wish I could say the same for the wound that the country got from your pathetic COVID policies and responses. I can't believe that we have a mid-level viral doctor chirping in on someone who got a superficial wound by a bullet flying by their head. I mean, Fauci is just another one. He's just so evil, so in over his head. He's such a government hack. It's annoying. But again, all the liberal blowback on Trump's assassination attempt, Joy Reid coming out and saying that the whole thing was staged. Yeah, of course. And the guy in the stands, the firefighter, Corey Compatore, yeah, that was just the old exploding head trick. I mean, you people are sick, absolutely sick. How would you possibly stage something like that? And why would you stage something like that? And again, this is, Joy Reid makes millions of dollars as a commentary. I mean, let's just say that her intellect is as superficial as Dr. Fauci called Donald Trump's head wound. And we are just rife with superficial intellects in this country. For God's sake, Fauci, go away. Go away. So it's just been kind of fun watching all of this happen. And now they're going to do the quick pivot to Kamala Harris, Kamala, whatever it is. she's becoming like Fredo in The Godfather, if you remember Michael Corleone's brother, Fredo, who they had kind of given him the Las Vegas business and played brilliantly by, I think, John Cassavetes. And Fredo was the one, come on, Michael, I'm smart. I'm not stupid like they say. And that's just before they row him out in the middle of a lake with a boat and shoot him in the head. So Kamala Fredo Harris now is going to convince the rest of the world that she's smart. She's not stupid like everybody says. So going to be interesting watching Fredo Harris navigate her ways through these choppy waters that are ahead of her. She is in so far over her head, it's almost laughable. And then, I hate to be cruel, but my goodness, watching... I think he's a senator, Democratic Senator Chris Coons, a grown man, probably 60 years old, openly sobbing and crying last night over Joe Biden's withdrawal. I mean, like someone who just had to put down a 17-year family pet, openly sobbing, like sniffling the whole, snot coming out his nose, the whole thing. Oscar-worthy performance. That people are just so deranged. It's unbelievable. Gavin Newsom, speaking of superficial head wounds, called Biden the most impactful president of a generation. Yeah, impactful, 100%. First time I've ever agreed with Gavin Newsom, and probably the last time, although I have a feeling we're thinking of impactful in two different ways. He's thinking of it in terms of what a brilliant president, what a great 4 years, everything you did for the country. And I'm thinking impactful more like a bad case of constipation with hemorrhoids. Yes, an impactful president, like a jackhammer, impactful. Did you buy a tank of gas lately, or go to a food store, or pay an insurance bill, or try to help one of your kids get into home ownership? Just stunning. And then, of course, Nancy Pelosi, the Pixar-created animatron, half human, half Pixar creation, also called Biden the most consequential president in the history of the country. And once again, never thought I'd say this, I'm in complete agreement with Nancy Pelosi. He certainly was the most consequential president in a long, long time, at least 100 years. But again, as with Newsom, I think we're probably on different pages in terms of what you consider consequential. There were certainly consequences to having Joe Biden as president. So this is stunning what's going on. They have effectively, and I said a couple weeks ago on this show, that isn't this an insurrection? Isn't this the Democrats' version of an insurrection? They are usurping the process. They are usurping our democratic process. There's no argument about that. They chose a nominee. They waited until their assassination attempt on Trump failed. They waited till Trump picked a VP, so they knew what they would be going up against. They waited until the Republican National Convention went by, which, again, I could spend a whole half hour talking about that. I mean, that was just phenomenal. We'll get into that for a few minutes before we wrap. But they didn't do the 25th Amendment. They haven't said why Joe Biden is not going to continue his campaign for 2024. But it has to be that they consider him incompetent. And if he's incompetent starting in January, then he must be incompetent now. We all know he is. But you can't just pull your guy out of the race when you feel like it because his poll numbers suck. You can't do that in a swimming competition or a track competition or at the Indy 500 or in any other logical place where that applies. You can't do that. Can you imagine the Democrats if the Republicans tried that? Like Trump's numbers were tanking, and then we just said, 3 or 4 months before the election, we're swapping him out. We don't like his numbers. It's just stunning how harebrained these people all are, and that they think that the rest of us should or are going to just roll over and accept this. It's crazy. Even Obama made this spectacular statement yesterday. He did this little paragraph, but in it he says, and this is verbatim, we're in uncharted waters and we will create a process. Well, who the hell do you think you are? Create a process? I mean, we did that 250 years ago, Barack. Are you joking? You're going to create a process? The king of the Democratic Party? I mean, every now and then, I'm telling you, you get these, not every now and then, it's pretty much constant, you get these Freudian slips like through the looking glass with Barack Obama. Yeah, I'm going to create a process, don't worry. I'm the big genius, in between, disposing of my high-paid chefs at Martha's Vineyard. Funny how that story just went away, right? Remember the chef who drowned in like 4 feet of water? Professional surfer? Never heard anything about that, did you? Just kind of goes away. Interesting. Seems like I'm becoming a conspiracy theory freak. So no worries. We're in uncharted waters, much like Barack's chef was last year when he drowned in 4 feet of water on a surfboard. He was in uncharted waters and probably didn't know it. But no worries. Barack is going to create a process. Well, this is what the Democrats do now. They just create a process as we go along. They actually think this is going to fly, like it's kosher to just pull your guy out after shoving him down our throats and then creating this cover-up. There was no cover-up. I mean, anyone who pays attention, if you believe what you see and not what you hear, which is what pragmatists do, and draw your own conclusions, then you've known for many years now that Joe Biden is in cognitive decline and that it has accelerated and that it is now to a point where he is not fit to lead the country. I would have argued that he wasn't fit to lead the country 40 years ago. I just think he's, not a smart man. He's, everybody talks about how consequential and his 50 years and everything he's done. Name one. I welcome anybody. Comment on this show. Give me one consequential piece of legislation Joe Biden drafted and got pushed through in his nearly 50 years in public office. One. I'm asking for one. Consequential, my ass. So very interesting times. And before we close it up here, just quickly, the Republican National Convention, those are usually a snooze. I never watch conventions. I'm a political wonk. I'm not a Republican. I'm not into that stuff. The convention to me is just like too much, the people with the hats and, to go and immerse yourself in politics for 4 or 5 days is just like a nauseating prospect to me. But I have to say, I watched many of the speeches during the Republican National Convention. Obviously, the night that Trump walked out the first time with the bandage on his ear, epic. And of course, the left was all saying fake bandage. Yeah, okay. Guy got grazed by a bullet, lost a piece of his ear. Just shut up. But epic night when Trump walked out, and then every night of the convention was amazing. Eric Trump's speech I thought was dead on, where he talked about his dad. Don Jr.'s speech was great. He brought his daughter out who said, I want to talk about my grandfather, Donald Trump, as the person we know and see him as. There were shots there of Trump with one of his little granddaughters sitting on his lap and all of that. And then, of course, the choice of J.D. Vance as vice president, which I just thought was stellar and epic. It's exactly who I've been hoping that Trump would pick through this whole thing. I have watched J.D. Vance for several years now. Most people know about the book and the movie and his upbringing, the hillbilly elegy, growing up in Appalachias of Kentucky to an alcoholic mom and drug-addicted mother, raised by his grandmother, joined the Marines, got himself out of there, put himself through Yale, graduated Yale, magna cum laude, and then off to a really successful business career. Just an epic guy. I actually had the chance to meet JD about 6 months ago in Manchester at Trump headquarters. Had a nice little conversation with him. I just think the world of him, and the reason is he embodies the American dream. This is what this country does, is offers the same opportunity to everybody, regardless of where you come from, your background. You can literally come from a shack in the Appalachians, grow up under those horrific conditions, and if you discipline yourself and you're willing to do the hard work and you're willing to say no to drugs and alcohols and bad decisions and do those things, then you can succeed in this country. And JD, to go from that to a vice presidential nominee, I just think is a awesome American story. So I think Trump, as usual, was brilliant in picking JD Vance. They are going to be an amazing pair together. JD's only 39 years old, super bright intellect, great sense of humor. I loved the part during his speech at the RNC where he talked about meeting his wife, who's Indian, at Yale. And when they talked about getting married, he said, well, all I have is $120,000 in student debt and a burial plot in Kentucky. And he talked about how they obviously really seem to love each other, have a great family. And I loved during the RNC speech that he kind of said to the audience, but to his wife, that, my background, and here we are, and I can't believe I've been nominated to be VP. And he said to his wife, it just keeps getting weirder and weirder, which I thought was just really touching. So we are off and running. I think Trump Vance is unstoppable, regardless of what the Democrats do. I think from here on out, make yourself some popcorn, sit back and enjoy the show. I don't think there's anything they can do, the Democrats or anyone they can roll out to change the course right now. The one thing, of course, they could do is to have a successful assassination attempt on Donald Trump. But now they kind of screwed themselves on that one too, because they have to now have ridiculous, overdone coverage, which you actually saw at the RNC and on his most recent rally this weekend, where, funny, all the Democrats had predicted that, people aren't going to go to Trump rallies because it's going to be too dangerous. And he just filled an arena with 20,000 people, and they have like another 10 or 20 outside. People showed up 2 days early and were camping. So I could be wrong, but it doesn't seem like anyone's afraid to go to a Trump rally. And I also think, we're short on time and there's just so much to cover. I also think Trump's speech at the RNC was just, yes, it went long, but come on, the guy just got shot at. I'm not going to complain that he spoke too long. It was a long speech, and it got a little campaignish in the middle. But the beginning, where he talked about the event, and he said, you're only going to hear this once from me because, frankly, it's too painful to talk about. But he talked about the event, feeling something. He got hit really hard. And then the fact that they had Compartori's firefighting uniform and helmet on stage, and Trump went over and embraced it and kissed the helmet. I'm telling you, just an amazing Republican National Convention. Nothing ever like it. That last night, Tucker Carlson, Eric Trump, Kid Rock came out, just set the place on fire. Hulk Hogan, and then Dana White introducing Trump. It just couldn't have been more well done. You want to talk about electric? That was electric. And then the model who came out, and I can't remember her name now because I'm not in that world, but very liberal young black girl who came out and gave her speech about how she came around to Trump. I mean, really, like every speaker that whole week was really dead on. It was fascinating. So lots of interesting stuff. We'll pick it up again next week, and God only knows what happens between now and then. It's really hard to keep up with, but we are living through history here. These are fascinating times, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on. If you're an American and a patriot, you should be absorbing all of this because this will be in the history books and we are living it in real time. Super, super fascinating. Next week, of course, we're going to have to cover whatever's happening today on Capitol Hill with Cheadle. Sounds like a snack food. Such an odd name for a Secret Service agent. But, she's another diversity hire. So, I think eventually we'll come around to, so we get away from the age thing. Commercial airline pilots, I think for years and years, the mandatory retirement was 65. I think, but I could be wrong, that they've bumped it up to maybe 67 or so don't hold me to that. But the point is, you're a commercial airline pilot, there's a mandatory retirement age. That's it, you're done. And I can tell you, I've known guys who flew commercially because I'm a private pilot. I've known guys who flew commercially and they're in their 80s, mid-80s, late 80s, still flying airplanes, fully compos mentis. And I would rather have one of those guys flying my 747 that I'm going to Europe on than some 25-year-old who just got out of Embry-Riddle. So I think I've always thought that the mandatory retirement age from airline pilots is really an injustice to the airline industry because a lot of these guys are at the top of their game and they've got 40,000 hours under their belt. They shouldn't necessarily have to retire, but that's the rule and everybody abides by it. So we might want to, at some point, think about a similar thing for being president of the United States, given that one could argue that carries at least the same responsibility as flying 400 people across an ocean. Some might argue more. Wow. What a time we're living in. Keep the blue side up. We'll see you next week. Carry on. Enjoy.